have a vague understanding, but the dog's probably not super trained by the time you show up.
No, so what I advise people personally, what I advise them to do is before we do a session, is I advise them to follow. Most of the time, they already follow me on social media because it's word of mouth or through social media that they've contacted me. Um, I would advise them to go on my YouTube channel, watch some videos. They would have given me already an indication of what their dog's general problems are, whether it's pulling on the leash, recall, not letting people in the home, barking, going for dogs, whatever it is. So I'll then refer them to look at certain videos on my YouTube channel or on my social media, and that's kind of their homework before they see me. I would say realistically 50-50. 50% will go and do that and 50% won't. Um,
Okay, so
but I'll
let's
emphasize
say
them when I see them. I'll emphasize when I see them going, look, if you had spent the last 3 weeks while you were waiting for this session, if you had actually spent that time teaching place, that wouldn't have eaten into our time right now that we need to take the time to teach you and to teach the dog a bit of place. Now, if you had already started to do it, even if you hadn't done it perfect, we would have just been ironing out some things. But now we're going to have to take an hour of your session time teaching this because it's important that everything is fair and makes sense to the dog, you know?
and so let's say you have a dog that is it will bark. It's a golden. It's a lab. It will run, bark at the door, and jump on people, but it's friendly. And
Well,
the dog knows.
I know what you mean by friendly. Like it's not obviously it's a soft dog and stuff, but that's the owner's interpretation is it's friendly. Whereas if somebody at the door is scared of dogs, it's a child, it's an old person, somebody doesn't like, that isn't accepted as friendly.
No, no, no. But I'm just saying from a trainer standpoint, like
Yeah.
you're not going to get bit by the dog.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Like like friendly, as in like with confidence that you're going to walk in and you're not going to get bit.
Yeah.
It's
Sure.
all bark, no bite, and it'll probably jump. And it'll after it barks at the door, it'll keep barking, and then when they let the dog in, it'll just start jumping all over you, kind of like out of control. And and then it's happy at that point.
Yeah.
Let's just say that for an example. And the dog knows place. They can send the dog to place from like 5 feet away. It will lay down automatically on place, but they can't get the dog to hold it for more than 15 feet away. If they're going back and constantly rewarding it, it'll stay. But when they actually like walk away for a little bit, it'll break, and they're having a hard time getting it to stay. And so you show up to the lesson, dog's on. They put the dog. You knock on the door. The dog starts barking at the door and starts jumping all over you. Um, like for me, one of the things that I've learned, and this could be wrong, but this is just from my perspective,
I mean, it's wrong. Don't be
is
silly.
when oh, okay, but or maybe it probably could be improved. Maybe not wrong, but could be improved. Is you know back in the day, when like the dogs would be jumping on me, I would be like, oh, and then I would correct the dog and do like a physical touch, and the dog would stop jumping. You
Yeah.
know, but then a lot of the times as I progressed through the lessons, the dog would like be scared of me and like not as confident because I had no trust with the dog.
Yep.
So then when I go right for the respect, and the dog's like gets scared because it doesn't really have like
Yeah, but there's a
any
difference.
relationship with me.
Well, there's a difference in being scared and being unsure. So the dog probably the first time in its life had actually been corrected properly in a way that made sense. And the thing is, the owners need to see reality as well. They need to see how proper touch correction is done. So your goal is to take the dog in that case from an excited dominant state to a calm submissive state. Now, the dog in that when the door
Hmm.
goes is not used to being in a calm submissive state. The dog is used to being in an excited dominant state. So when you've taken that dog in a second from being in the driver's seat to being in the trunk of the car, they are going to be calm. They're going to be submissive.
Yeah.
But they're going to be a bit unsure. And
Yes.
but that's the first time in their life that they've actually done piano lessons. Every day's just been soft play. So you have to be able to have the attention. Now, yeah, if the dog isn't being dangerous, you can go in and instead of you instantly taking over, you could be asking, okay,
Yeah.
what would you do in this situation, etc. It all depends on the knowledge of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I try to always have the owners correct the dog. I'm like, hey, I can stop this in 2 seconds, you
Yeah,
know. But if I do it, then the dog's gonna be like really good listening to me, and also it's not gonna be like I'm not gonna be able to like teach it anything with food because a lot of times if you jab them, they just all of a sudden stop eating, you know.
yeah,
And it's cool to like get them to stop the jumping, but then the dog, for me at least, when I've done it, they're like more apprehensive. Um,
yeah. But you just do.
so
So instead of using a poke, for example, there, if I came in
yeah,
dogs repeatedly jumping or whatever, I always go into any home with a slip leash on, and I'd probably just
yeah.
get the slip leash and just give them more of a milder interruption.
Thank you.
Don't completely burst the bubble. Like, only do fifty
Yeah, yeah,
percent
yeah,
of the work. So you've got your start. The dogs doesn't know who you are or why you're there. The dog is just going to go a little bit like, oh, this is different. Something's going on here.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that still gives you some brownie points to be able to
yeah,
be like, hiya, how are you? And give them a cuddle and
yeah,
treat
yeah, yeah.
them. But remember, your goal is
Thank
not for you to build that amazing relationship with that dog. Your goal in that period of time is to show the client this is what can be accomplished, but this is what's missing in your relationship. And then
mm,
and then once you've burst the bubble, you can then spend the next 2.5 hours or whatever it is going. Like, now let's train you to do the same thing.
yeah. So what would that in a perfect world, what would that client do? Would it be like dogs barking at the door, walk up, no, burst the bubble with the poke, spatial pressure, and then spatial pressure to the place, and then wait for the dog to relax?
No.
Or what would
Yeah, but I wouldn't be using
with the
any.
client?
Yeah, so first thing I'd be
So like
saying,
like if like as soon as the doorbell ring, instead of the client being on the other side, you like boom, and then you transferred in, and now you like went out. You're like you're Roddy Kirk. You were on the toilet, and then all of a sudden the dog does that, and you like come out of the bathroom like, oh, I got to handle this now, and the dog's off the leash and doing that. Like what's your approach right away?
so straight away, the first thing is when the person is not in control, because that's I'm not in control.
Yes,
How am I touching my dog? So in the homes, generally straight away, nice and easy. Attach a slip leash. Attach a slip leash. Have a slip leash on. The leash
yes,
should not be coming off until you don't feel you need it anymore. So
yes.
it would be attaching the leash. It depends on the tools the dog's already trained with. So some you go to and the dog's already remote collar trained, for example. You're like, well, this is easy.
Mm-hmm.
And how many clients do you see and their dog's remote collar trained, but they haven't realized and transferred that to they can use the remote collar indoors? Always thought it's just for recall. And you're like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Have you not listened to anything I've said or taught you? But
Mm.
I'm like, oh yeah, why are you not just using that at the window or in the garden or at the front door?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, um, so the first thing I'd be saying is door goes, dog starts barking. What I would do is I would say, right, going. The goal is that the dog stays on the place while you answer the door. That's the goal,
Yes,
and is calm.
yes.
But to get there, there's going to be baby steps. So if the dog, as you're saying, has already got quite a strong place, you're maybe a bit further
Yeah,
on, but you're still always working on distance, duration, distraction, right? So what the
yes,
dog is showing you right now is it can do place, but up to this level of distance and distraction or this level of duration. So
yes.
when then it comes to, for example, the door going, first thing is, okay, does the dog have a leash on? Because the dog should have that leash.
Yeah.
Now, you said in the perfect world, so this is where I'm different to other trainers here. So I do not mark, I do not know, then correction.
Yeah.
Do that. Okay, until I know that word carries some meaning, and I know that the level of correction I'm going to give is going to work. I do not.
Mm.
I do not. I am physical, then verbal. I am not verbal, then
Okay.
physical. Okay,
Okay.
I'm
So you get the leash
physical.
on the dog?
Yeah, because they right now are going to instantly because they're learning, so they're probably going to make the pop of the leash, for example, wrong. So all they're conditioning the dog is to ignore no. So you go no, and then pop the dog, and the client does that, and the dog like half listens. So no means negotiable. No mean kiss
Mm.
on the backside. So I make sure they get the behavior they want, then add a name to it. get the behavior you want, then add a name. So when you've managed to get this remote collar, this poke, this heel touch, this leash pop, this bonker, this whatever they're choosing to use to stop the behavior, once they do that, then I add the word. So because now you've got the attention. So you give that leash pop and the dog stops and looks at them, then you can go, no. Now you don't need to shout it because your touch was the shout. So you don't need to shout. You can be calm. You can be quiet. Now you need to get that a bunch of times under your belt before you can do avoidance. Avoidance obviously is where you say the word and the dog has an opportunity to avoid the speeding ticket if they listen to the word. But if you know your speeding ticket isn't going to carry any weight, then why you can't do that yet. You have to make sure your level of correction is the right level before you can be verbal, in my opinion. I'm not whenever I'm training a dog, I am doing verbal then physical. Whenever I'm correcting a dog initially, and especially the client, they are physical then verbal. So they're having to learn the dog language before the dog can learn the English language or the Spanish or the human language, the verbal. So very simply, on leash, let's just say, for example, it works. On the leash, whatever, say it's slip lead, prong collar, e-collar, whatever, but slip lead or prong, let's just say right now. So they give that, because the dog's already up high, we need to correct that. So they would give the leash a pop. No.
Yeah.
And then if the dog is already quite good on place, then they go into place. Just drop the leash.
What if they pop the leash and it doesn't, the dog like snaps out of it for a second and then tries to go back to the door?
Well, the correction.
Harder.
Well, yeah, the correction's not appropriate. Sometimes it's not necessarily harder. It might be changing the tool. So they can pop as hard as they like, with a slip leash, and they pop the dog's head off and it still ignores them. So you have to change to a better tool. I always find my goal always is to use the least amount of physical to get the most psychological. That's what you're trying to do with the dog. Least physical, most psychological. Because the more physical you add as well, there's going to be more emotion attached. So whether that is affection or whether that is correction, you're going to have more. The more physical, you're going to add more emotion. So if the person is using a slip leash, for example, and they give the dog a pop, and I feel they could be more gentle but more effective. For example, with a prong, let's switch to the prong, and we'll go and teach the prong first. So we'll go outside and teach the prong, and then we'll come back and do the door. So we need to find the tool that actually bursts the dog bubble, because you can't begin to give the dog direction if you don't have the dog's attention.
And would you recommend if they don't have a prong, just to do the physical, the poke, and then use the slip leash?
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, I've got those tools. I've always got those tools with me. I go into somebody's home with all those tools so that I can educate and show them. So we find the right tool that's going to work for that dog, depending on what the issue is, whether it's going to be a clicker or a whistle or a prong or an e-collar or slip lead or a harness or whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. But in general, people are calling you to stop behaviours. So the best to go to is generally prong and e-collar. That's just reality.
Yeah.
And why best? Because they're the most gentle but most effective. That's why they're best, and they make most sense to the dog. So they would get a pop to burst the bubble to get the attention, whatever that looks like, but generally, ideally on a leash, because the pop gets the attention, but it doesn't give direction. So you still need to give direction to the dog. So the leash just allows you to. So ding dong, the door goes. I would then be dog barks, pop. No, let's just assume that's worked. And if it hasn't, that's
and it
the
worked.
first port of call. Because if you haven't got that bit, you can't move to the next part. So you have to get that first. So then, if the dog already knows place, you take them and you're literally saying, "Do this instead." To clients, I don't really call it a command. I say we call this "do this instead," because that's really what a command is. A command is really always just kind of saying "do this instead." So you then say, Rufus, place, take them to place, make it happen, say it once, make it happen, put them on place, then you go back to the door. If the dog
What if he gets off the bed right away after you get him back on place?
well, you go back, you pick up the leash, you give it a pop, and you're like, no, and then you put them back on place.
Oh, okay. Okay, so as soon as they get off, you pop.
Absolutely.
You don't gently guide him back. You
Well,
pop,
why? You have
pop.
to, but they broke. There's two reasons, Grant. You correct a dog. One is if they do something wrong, like like lunge at a dog or try and eat somebody, or obvious
Yeah,
correction.
yeah, yeah.
That's one reason you correct a dog. The other reason is if they break command without your permission.
Yes.
So the dog just got off place without your permission. If you don't correct
Yeah.
it, then you're making it wasn't a command, and it's negotiable.
Yeah. So, and then how do you know when it's fair to correct with the pop for the dog getting off of place? Is it pretty much like as soon as you can stand there with not even looking at the dog and say place and the dog runs back and lays down, right as soon as you see that, then you can start correcting for it? Or how do you know
Not even
when
as
it's
much
fair
as
to
that.
go
You
with
can
the
do less than that. You can do it before that. Um,
really?
yeah, of course. Like you take the distraction away first, of course, where you're just doing your
Yeah, of
bunch
course.
of
Yeah, yeah.
ins and outs into place, and then you
Yeah,
work
yeah.
on duration and distance, and the dog is
Yeah.
then, and you're then maybe off of place. You're then telling the dog, right, Rufus, place, and before you can use the leash, the dog's going on to place. You
Yeah,
can
of course. Yeah.
straight from there,
Yes.
right now, you can start issuing
Yeah.
correction. Now that
Okay,
does
thank
not
you.
mean I do not mean you're going to be popping the dog's head off or being really harsh. I don't mean that in any way. What I mean is
Yeah.
the level of correction, regardless, should always match the action.
Yep. And so you would know